AITA for refusing to invite my sister to my wedding after she embarrassed me in my bridal shower. I, 28F, have always been close with my sister, Emma, 26F, or at least I thought I was. Growing up, we fought like most siblings do, but we also had each other's backs. In the last few years, she moved across the country for work, and we still talked regularly. When I got engaged to my fiancé, David, 30M, I was beyond excited to have her involved in the wedding planning and celebrations. I wanted her to be my maid of honor, and I genuinely imagined us having a beautiful, memorable experience leading up to the wedding. About 2 months before the wedding, my friends and family threw me a bridal shower. It was small, intimate, just 15 people including close friends, cousins, and my fiancé's family. Emma was supposed to help me with a game and opening gifts. I was really looking forward to this because I trusted her to keep everything lighthearted and fun. Things started off fine. Emma helped me with the game and kept things lively. But as soon as it was time to open gifts, she started making jokes about my fiancé and our relationship. At first, it was subtle. She'd say things like, "Are you sure he's good enough for you?" Or, "I hope he knows what he's signing up for," in a playful tone, so I laughed it off. I thought maybe she was just being her usual sarcastic self. Then she opened a gift from my aunt, which was a beautiful pearl necklace. Instead of thanking my aunt, Emma loudly commented that it was probably the cheapest thing she could find and that I could do better. People laughed awkwardly, but I was embarrassed. I tried to redirect the conversation, but she wouldn't stop. Every gift I opened, she found some way to critique or insult it. She even made a comment about my dress, saying it looked nice, but maybe not flattering enough for someone with my shape. By the time she made a joke implying David's ex-girlfriends were probably prettier than me, I lost it. I asked her to stop multiple times, but she laughed and said I was too sensitive and taking everything too seriously. My friends and family were visibly uncomfortable. Some of them tried to change the subject, but Emma kept steering the conversation back to humiliating me in front of everyone. I ended up leaving the shower early, feeling humiliated and upset. David was furious, and my mom and aunts told Emma they were disappointed in her behavior. I decided to take a few days to cool down before confronting her. When I finally spoke to Emma, I explained how hurtful her comments were and how they made me feel embarrassed in front of my friends and family. She brushed it off, saying I was overreacting and that it was just a joke and that people need to have a sense of humor. I tried to explain that the difference between teasing and publicly humiliating someone is consent and context, but she refused to apologize. Fast forward to a few weeks before the wedding, my stress levels were high, and my excitement had been replaced with anxiety about what she might do. I realized I didn't want her at my wedding party, or even at my wedding if she couldn't control herself. I know this is extreme, but I genuinely feared she would make another scene. I told her I couldn't have her as my maid of honor, and that I wasn't sure she should even attend the wedding if she couldn't respect my feelings. Emma lost it. She called me selfish, dramatic, and claimed I was punishing her for having fun. She said that no other family member has ever been so sensitive and that she didn't understand why I was making a big deal out of something everyone laughed at. My mom tried to mediate, but Emma refused to listen. She even threatened to boycott the wedding entirely and said she might stop talking to me if I forced her hand. At this point, I had to make a choice. I spoke with David and my immediate family and decided not to invite her to the wedding. I sent a message explaining that due to her actions at the bridal shower and her unwillingness to respect my feelings, I felt it would be healthier for both of us if she didn't attend. I made it clear it wasn't a decision I took lightly, but I needed my wedding to be a positive experience without worrying about public humiliation. Unsurprisingly, the reaction from Emma has been extreme. She's called me every name under the sun, posted on social media about how toxic I am, and even tried to guilt my parents into convincing me to change my mind. Some of my friends are worried I overreacted, saying she was just joking, while others support my decision, saying I'm entitled to protect my wedding experience. I feel awful for cutting her out, but I also feel like I can't let her behavior go unchecked. I keep questioning myself. Did I overreact? Should I have tried harder to include her despite her behavior? Or is it fair to set a hard boundary when someone repeatedly humiliates you in front of people you care about? I haven't spoken to her in 2 weeks, and the wedding is in 3. I'm anxious about how this will affect our family dynamics, but I also feel a sense of relief knowing I won't have to deal with potential embarrassment on one of the most important days of my life. So Reddit, AITA for refusing to invite my sister to my wedding after her behavior at my bridal shower. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to give my adult son a large sum of money, even though my husband thinks I'm being unreasonable. I, 57F, have a son, Ethan, 28M, from my first marriage. Ethan has always been ambitious, but he's also had a history of making impulsive financial decisions. He's currently employed as a freelance videographer, which has been fine most of the time, but the nature of the work means his income fluctuates a lot. My husband, Daniel, 60M, and I have been married for 10 years, and we have a blended household where finances are mostly separate, though we share major expenses like mortgage, utilities, and vacations. A few months ago, Ethan approached me with a plan that immediately made me uneasy. He wants to start a new production company with a friend, and he asked me for a $50,000 loan to help cover initial equipment, studio space, and licensing fees. I asked him for a detailed business plan and financial projections, thinking that would make the decision easier. What he gave me was a 2-page outline that basically said, "We're going to make viral content and grow fast. You'll get your money back in a year." I explained that lending $50,000 based on that plan would be extremely risky. I tried to negotiate by suggesting he start smaller, perhaps renting equipment, doing short projects, or getting a small business loan with collateral, rather than expecting me to front the full amount. I also reminded him that while I want to support his career, putting my financial security at risk was not reasonable. Ethan became frustrated and said that I never believe in him and that I was holding him back from greatness. He argued that his friend's family was contributing, that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and that if I really loved him, I would invest in his future. He also said that Daniel was unfair for questioning my decision. I didn't feel comfortable sharing the risk with Daniel either, because I didn't want to involve him in a decision that was ultimately mine. However, Daniel has taken Ethan's side. He told me that I should trust Ethan and that $50,000 is not that much relative to our savings. Daniel also said that this is your son, it's family, and you don't want to be the obstacle in his dreams. I tried reasoning again, pointing out that our retirement funds and mortgage are partially tied to the same savings, and losing that money could jeopardize our future plans. I even offered to contribute $5,000 as a gesture of support and to help him get started on a smaller scale. But Ethan said that was pathetic and won't make a difference. Tensions escalated after that conversation. Ethan stopped speaking to me directly for a week and started sending Daniel messages about how mom isn't supporting her own family and won't invest in the next generation. Daniel has started hinting to me that I should loosen up and consider the bigger picture, saying that my refusal is creating tension in the family. I also learned that Ethan has been talking to extended relatives, saying that I'm being selfish and that Daniel agrees with him privately. Some family members have reached out, asking me why I'm blocking his dreams and suggesting that I reconsider. This makes me feel cornered because I genuinely want to support Ethan in ways that don't involve risking a large sum of money. Clara, my stepdaughter from Daniel's previous marriage, noticed the tension and asked me if Daniel's pressure is making me uncomfortable. I admitted it is, and she said it's reasonable to prioritize my financial security. I also feel frustrated because Ethan seems unwilling to compromise or accept smaller forms of help. He's implying that if I don't give the full amount, I'm not a good parent. I'm starting to worry that refusing will cause lasting damage to our relationship. I've spent most of Ethan's life trying to balance supporting him with teaching responsibility, and I feel like this is the ultimate test. I want him to succeed, but not at the expense of my own stability or peace of mind. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to give my adult son $50,000 for a risky business venture, even though my husband thinks I'm being unreasonable. AITA for refusing to give my stepdaughter's expensive phone back to her after she broke my laptop. I, 38M, have been married to my wife, Karen, 36F, for 6 years. She has a daughter, Lily, 15F, from a previous marriage, and I've always tried to have a good relationship with her. I've been generous and supportive, buying clothes, paying for extracurricular activities, and generally trying to treat her like my own. But recently, something happened that has put me in a moral and ethical dilemma. About a month ago, Lily borrowed my laptop to work on a school project. I specifically told her that she needed to handle it carefully because it's an expensive device with software I use for work. I also told her not to eat or drink near it. She promised she would be careful. A few hours later, I found the laptop with a completely shattered screen. There were liquid stains, scratches, and it was completely unusable. I was furious, not just because of the financial loss, but because she ignored my explicit instructions. I confronted Lily immediately. She started crying and said it was an accident, that she didn't mean it, and that she just got distracted. I asked her if she would take responsibility or help pay for repairs, and she said she couldn't because she didn't have any money. I was frustrated, but tried to stay calm and went to talk to Karen. I expected her to back me up, but she said, "It was an accident. Let it go. You're overreacting. She's just a kid." I explained that it wasn't about being angry at her as a child, but about accountability, especially since this was a high-value item I rely on for work. Karen didn't respond to that. She just sighed and said Lily would feel bad enough. Later that day, I noticed Lily was playing with her new iPhone that her grandparents had bought her for her birthday. That's when I got the idea. I told her, "Until you take responsibility for this laptop, your phone stays with me." I made it clear that I wasn't trying to punish her permanently. I just wanted her to understand the consequences of her actions and acknowledge that breaking expensive things has real implications. I also told Karen about my plan beforehand. She was upset and said I was being mean-spirited and vindictive toward Lily. I argued that it was temporary, reasonable, and tied directly to accountability, not punishment. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated. Lily begged, cried, and pleaded for her phone back. She tried to bribe me with favors, promised to clean the house, and even threatened to skip school. I didn't give in. I also contacted a repair shop and got an estimate for fixing the laptop, $1, $200. When I shared that with Karen and Lily, they said it was ridiculous and too expensive for a 15-year-old to be responsible for. I pointed out that the cost wasn't about Lily paying out of pocket entirely, but understanding that her negligence had consequences and that she should contribute however she could, maybe through chores, savings, or doing extra work. Karen started trying to negotiate with me. She suggested I take partial responsibility since I let Lily use the laptop unsupervised. She also said Lily was already stressed with school, and that taking the phone was excessive. I felt like I was being cornered into giving up a principle I believed in, teaching accountability. The more they pushed, the more I felt justified in holding onto the phone until Lily fully recognized the consequences of her actions. Last weekend, the situation came to a head. Lily refused to do her homework or help around the house, insisting I return her phone. I told her the phone wouldn't be returned until she either contributed to the laptop repair or demonstrated consistent responsibility for 2 weeks. Karen got involved and accused me of bullying Lily and destroying her trust. I explained that it's not about trust, but about responsibility, and that trust needs to be earned, not blindly given. Karen then threatened to take the phone herself or call the police, implying that I was stealing it. I reminded her that the phone belonged to Lily, yes, but I wasn't selling it, destroying it, or hiding it from her permanently. I was simply holding it until she made amends for the damage she caused. I even offered compromises like letting her use it under supervision or allowing short periods of usage if she did chores or homework. She refused, insisting it was emotionally abusive to keep it. A few of our friends and extended family members are split on this. Some say I'm teaching a valuable lesson in accountability and that temporary consequences are healthy. Others say I'm too harsh, and that holding onto the phone could damage my relationship with Lily. I love her and don't want to create long-term resentment, but I also feel strongly that this is the moment to instill a sense of responsibility for one's actions. So now I'm stuck between my principles and my family's opinion. I feel justified, but I also worry I may be seen as the villain in this situation, especially since Karen is siding with Lily. AITA for refusing to give my stepdaughter her expensive phone back after she broke my laptop. AITA for refusing to host my sister's wedding at my house even though she needs it. I, 32F, have always been the responsible sibling. I have a stable job, a comfortable home, and I've always tried to help my family when they needed me. My younger sister, Lily, 28F, on the other hand, let's just say she has a tendency to overpromise and underdeliver. She has bounced through jobs, apartments, and boyfriends like some people change their socks, and my parents have spent years trying to help her get her life together. I don't like to get involved in her chaos unless it directly affects me, but recently she crossed a line. Lily got engaged about a month ago. It was a surprise because she never really has long-term relationships. She was over the moon and immediately started talking about her dream wedding. Here's the catch. She wants it at my house. Specifically at my house in my backyard. She told me she can't afford a venue because she spent all her money on her dream dress and insists that since I have a nice backyard and a house that can hold 100 people, it should be the obvious solution. My house is not huge. It's a standard suburban 3-bedroom with a modest backyard. It can accommodate a small family barbecue comfortably, but 100 people? Not even close. I told her that I don't feel comfortable hosting that many people at my house. I don't want strangers traipsing through my home, potentially breaking things, and I certainly don't want to be responsible for catering, decorations, or cleaning up afterward. I also explained that her wedding would require renting tables, chairs, and tents, and frankly, that's a huge additional cost I don't want to handle. I thought she would understand, but she blew up. She called me selfish and said I'm family, so I should help her and that I'm ruining her dream. My parents sided with her, saying it's just a wedding and I should make a little sacrifice for my sister. I tried to reason with them, saying it's not a little sacrifice. It's potentially thousands of dollars, tons of stress, and a serious disruption to my life. I even offered some alternative solutions. She could look into a community hall, a park, or even just a smaller backyard wedding at her own place or a friend's house. She refused every suggestion, claiming none of them are as perfect as my backyard. Things escalated when she started asking me to help in other ways. She asked me to drive her to dress fittings, help with catering arrangements, and even basically act as her wedding planner, all unpaid. When I said I couldn't, she accused me of not loving her and only caring about myself. My parents again stepped in, telling me I'm being dramatic and need to think about family. I set firm boundaries. I told Lily that I will not host her wedding, I will not coordinate anything, and I will not be responsible for her guest list. I said I'm happy to attend her wedding, and if she wants me involved in minor ways like picking flowers or helping with invites, I'm open to that, but nothing that requires me to manage or financially back the event. Lily responded by saying that if I don't help, she'll find another sister who cares, and that she might not invite me at all. Now there's been a full-blown family feud. My parents are upset, Lily is furious, and my cousins are taking sides. I've been called heartless, ungrateful, and selfish over and over. I feel like I'm being reasonable. My house is not a wedding venue, and it's not my responsibility to fund or host her wedding just because she has no money. I've tried compromise, but she refuses anything that isn't exactly what she wants. I'm starting to feel like if I give in, I'll regret it forever. This is supposed to be my safe space, not a rented-out party zone. I also know from experience that if I let her manipulate me once, she will never stop using me for things she wants. But on the other hand, everyone in my family seems to think I should just put up with it because it's a wedding and it's her special day. So, Reddit. AITA for refusing to host my sister's wedding at my house. I feel like I'm being pushed into a corner and everyone is painting me as the villain just because I said no. AITA for refusing to let my sister name her baby after my late husband, even though she claims I'm being selfish and dramatic. Before anyone jumps in, I know this sounds simple on the surface, but the emotional landmines underneath it are huge. I'm 34, my sister is 29, and my husband passed away 3 years ago. He and I had been together since we were 19. High school sweethearts, did everything together, the whole cliché, except the ending wasn't romantic. He died suddenly in an accident on his way home from a night shift. One of those senseless tragedies where you never get answers, just condolences and casseroles. My sister and I were fairly close growing up, but we were never the type to share clothes or secrets. She's always been a little impulsive, a little self-centered, but not malicious. More like chronically unaware of the impact of her actions. She also likes to be the center of attention, and our parents encouraged it. I was the quiet one, the studious one, the dependable one. My husband was the only person in my life who didn't make me feel like background scenery. His name was Liam. Fast forward. My sister got pregnant last year after trying for a while with her partner, and the entire family has been over the moon. I've been supportive despite the complicated feelings, because I genuinely want to be a good aunt. I've attended the baby shower, bought things off their registry, gone to doctor's appointments when her partner couldn't, all of it. About 2 months ago, she and her partner invited me over to share something special. I honestly thought it was going to be a cake with pink or blue inside or something. Instead, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We picked a name. We want to name him Liam." I froze. At first, I genuinely thought she was trying to honor him. But then she kept talking, explaining how Liam is such a cute name, how it fits her aesthetic, how it sounds great with her last name, and how she just loves the vibe. Not once did she mention my husband. Not once did she say it was to honor him or remember him or anything even remotely sentimental. It was like she had completely detached the name from the person who meant the most to me. I felt sick. I asked carefully, "You know those my husband's name. Are you naming him after him?" She shrugged, and said, "I mean, kind of. But honestly, we just really like the name. It feels right. And it's been long enough, hasn't it?" I went home and cried harder than I have in years. It felt like someone sandpapered my insides. I know people don't own names, but this felt violating. Like someone taking your wedding ring because it looks cute on them. I didn't say anything for a couple of weeks because I wanted to avoid making a decision out of raw emotion. But every time I thought about calling my nephew by my husband's name, every time I imagined hearing our parents cooing it at holiday dinners, every time I pictured seeing it stitched on a little blanket at Christmas, I felt physically ill. So I finally sat them down and told them that I wasn't comfortable with them naming the baby Liam, that it still hurts too much, and I didn't think I could handle hearing that name constantly in our family without falling apart. I asked them to pick literally any other name. I wasn't rude, I wasn't screaming, I was shaking and tearing up, but calm. My sister lost it. She accused me of trying to control her child, said I was making everything about me, that I was jealous she was having a baby, that I liked being the tragic widow and didn't want to move on. Her partner looked uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. She said I was emotionally manipulating her by making her pregnancy about my grief, and that she shouldn't have to change something she loves just because it upsets me. I told her she could name her child whatever she wants, but I would need distance if she chose Liam because I wasn't emotionally strong enough to cope. She called it a threat. The family, of course, is divided. My parents say they understand both sides, but think I should try to let it go, because a baby's name shouldn't reopen old wounds so deeply. My mom even said he wouldn't mind. He'd want you to be happy. And that felt like another knife twist, because how would she know what he would want? My brother thinks my sister is being insensitive and deliberately provocative because she always wants attention. He told me privately that when she announced the name to them, she didn't mention my husband at all, just how cool the name was. He said she looked annoyed when my parents asked whether it was meant as an homage. My sister has been texting me paragraphs, saying I'm ruining her pregnancy experience and making her feel guilty over something as minor as a name. She says I'm punishing her child before he's even born and that I'm weaponizing grief. But I'm not telling her she can't name her baby Liam. I'm saying I can't handle being part of that if she does. I feel like I'm being cornered into either swallowing emotional pain for the rest of my life or being labeled the cold-hearted villain who abandoned her family. And here's the complicated bit. A small part of me wonders if I'm overreacting. If I'm letting grief make me territorial. If maybe this is my brain clinging to the last pieces of him because it's scared of losing more. But another, louder part says that my sister treating his name like a trendy accessory is deeply disrespectful. I've asked friends, and they're split. Some say names are fair game, and I need therapy. I already go. Others say my sister must know exactly what she's doing and is choosing the path of maximum drama. Now I'm stuck in this limbo where the baby is due soon. The name is apparently still Liam unless I get over myself, and I feel like I'm drowning in a situation I didn't create. So, Reddit-style internet strangers, AITA? AITA for refusing to take my brother's kids to live with me after he lost custody. Even though my family thinks I should, I've been wrestling with whether I'm in the wrong. But after talking to my friends and considering everything carefully, I still feel conflicted. I just need to put this out there and maybe get some perspective. A bit of background. I'm 32, single, and live in a small city in a 2-bedroom apartment that I genuinely love. I work full-time as a software engineer, which is demanding but allows me some flexibility. I also value my personal space and routines, and I've always been a bit of a homebody. I have a younger brother, 28, who has always been charming but very impulsive and, honestly, irresponsible. He has 2 kids, ages 6 and 8, and up until recently, he had joint custody with their mother, who passed away unexpectedly about 6 months ago. My brother initially struggled with the sudden loss and tried to keep everything together. At first, I thought he could manage, but it quickly became clear that he was in over his head. He missed days at work, forgot appointments, and his kids were starting to show signs of neglect. Messy schoolwork, irregular meals, and so on. Eventually, the courts stepped in, and he temporarily lost custody until he could prove he could provide a stable environment. That's when things became complicated. He reached out to me, asking if I could take the kids for a while until he got back on his feet. I was honest with him. I love my niece and nephew, but I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, work long hours, and have no experience raising kids full-time. I tried to suggest alternatives, like a family friend who is a stay-at-home parent, or even asking him to apply for a foster care arrangement temporarily. I explained that while I would help in other ways, picking them up from school, babysitting occasionally, financially supporting them, I could not commit to full-time care. My brother was furious. He accused me of being selfish, claiming that family should come first and that I owed it to my niece and nephew to provide a home. He said things like, "What kind of aunt are you if you let your own family go through this without stepping up? And they're going to hate you if you don't help." I tried to reason with him, saying that stability is important for kids, and uprooting them into a 2-bedroom apartment with a single, busy adult might do more harm than good. He refused to listen. This is where the family drama escalated. My parents found out I said no. They were equally upset. My mom said, "You're being heartless. Don't you care about your brother's children? You've never refused to help before." My dad was more pragmatic, but still guilt-tripped me, saying, "You could make it work if you really tried. They're your family. Don't let your comfort get in the way of doing what's right." My cousins and other relatives chimed in on social media, making posts implying I was cold and uncaring. It's been exhausting. I've tried to explain my position calmly. I suggested a schedule where I help with homework a few days a week, pay for extra childcare, and even spend weekends with them so my brother can focus on getting custody back. I've tried to make it clear that I love them and will do as much as I realistically can, but everyone seems to interpret that as I don't care. The thing is, I've looked at what full-time custody would require, and I just don't see how I could manage it responsibly without risking my job, my mental health, or the kids' well-being. I live in a small apartment with 1 bedroom and a tiny living area. I can manage sleepovers occasionally, but having 2 kids live with me permanently feels overwhelming. I also don't have any experience with school systems, doctor visits, or the daily logistics of raising children on my own. I think my limitations are realistic and responsible, but it seems like everyone around me thinks it's just me being lazy or uncaring. My brother hasn't really been taking care of himself either. He drinks occasionally to cope, is behind on bills, and isn't organized enough to manage the kids' routines. I've tried to help him in other ways, like providing financial support and helping him navigate the court process, but he's constantly framing it as "I do everything for you. Why can't you just do this one thing?" I know family should support each other, but I also feel like my family is pushing me into a situation I'm unprepared for, and that could be harmful for both me and the kids. I've been called selfish, cold, heartless, and accused of betraying my niece and nephew. My friends mostly think I'm reasonable, but I can't shake the guilt, especially because the kids do love spending time with me. So, AITA for refusing to take my brother's kids to live with me full time, even though I'm helping in other ways and want to support them without putting them in a potentially unstable situation. I keep second-guessing myself because it seems like everyone is against me, but I truly believe I'm making the responsible choice for everyone involved. AITA for refusing to let my parents move into my house even though they said they planned their future around me. I'm 34M, only child, and for most of my life my parents have been the type who insist they're extremely independent while quietly expecting me to handle everything behind the scenes. They're not bad people, but they are absolutely the kind of parents who assume their kid will always be available. I moved out at 22, got a stable job in IT, bought a small 3-bedroom house at 31, and generally kept a good relationship with them. We don't fight, but we're not deeply emotional either. For context, my parents have always been cagey about their financial situation. They live in the same paid-off house I grew up in, but they're very private. If you ask my dad how much his pension is, he'll joke that it's enough for a beer and a sandwich. My mom will complain about grocery prices like she's living on pennies, but refuses to show anyone her budget. I've never pushed too hard because I figured they were fine. About 8 months ago, my mom started bringing up the idea of aging gracefully and living close to family. I assumed she meant they wanted to move to the same city. I said that was nice and that it would be good to have them nearby. That's it. I never agreed to anything more. Then, 3 months ago, everything blew up. My parents invited me over for dinner and told me they had decided to put their house on the market. They'd already spoken to a realtor. They planned to sell it to downsize and use the money to help me with projects around my place. I was confused and asked what they meant, and my dad casually said, "Well, of course we'll be moving in with you. That extra bedroom will be perfect for your mom's craft stuff." I genuinely thought they were joking. I laughed. They didn't. My mom explained that they didn't want to get stuck in their house in old age and had been planning for years to move in with me when the time was right. Apparently, they assumed I knew this. I absolutely did not. They said that since I wasn't married, didn't have kids, and had a larger house than one person needed, it was obvious I would want to live with them. My dad then mentioned he already told the realtor they'd be ready to list next month. I told them to hold on and asked why they thought I'd agree to this. My mom got emotional and said, "Because we're family." I said I loved them, but living together wasn't something I wanted. I reminded them that I work from home half the week and need a quiet space. My dad shrugged and said, "We're quiet." Mostly, my parents were stunned that I wasn't immediately thrilled. They said I'd be saving them from dealing with home maintenance, and that they'd help with chores, cook meals, and bring life into the house. I told them that I'd prefer they stay in their home or look into a smaller place nearby. They insisted that moving twice would be too stressful and that selling their house meant they'd have cash for retirement while still living with support. I repeated that I was not agreeing to this. They got tense and quiet. My mom said, "So you want us to rot alone in that big house?" I said no, of course not, but they needed to plan based on what they wanted, not assumptions about my space. The night ended awkwardly. A week later, my parents showed up at my house unannounced with brochures for storage units, movers, and home renovation ideas. They acted like I'd changed my mind. When I told them I hadn't, they accused me of flipping on them and said they'd already done so much planning. My mom cried again, saying she felt unwanted in her own child's home. Then came the real shock. My dad called me and said that selling their house wasn't optional anymore because they had already accepted an offer. They did this without telling me. The sale closes this summer. They said they had nowhere else to go and would temporarily stay with me while they figured out the next step. That's when I drew a hard line. I told them they could not move in, not even temporarily. I told them I'd help them search for apartments, senior communities, anything, but they would not be living with me. They got furious. My mom said I abandoned them. My dad said he was disgusted that I'd let strangers house them instead of taking them in. My parents have now told extended family, and several relatives have contacted me to say I'm being cruel, ungrateful, selfish, and that I should be honored to take care of my parents. One aunt even said, "Children exist because someday parents will need care." A cousin texted that I should suck it up because they won't live forever. But it's not about not wanting to care for them someday. It's that they made enormous financial decisions based on assumptions and emotional manipulation. They didn't discuss their plans with me. They announced them. They didn't ask if I wanted them to live with me. They treated it as a fact. And now they're using guilt and family pressure to force me into it. I've offered them money toward rent, help finding a place, rides to appointments, and visiting regularly. But I cannot live with them. I like my space, my routines, my quiet. I don't want to become a live-in caretaker at 34 because my parents didn't plan responsibly. Now my parents aren't speaking to me except through passive-aggressive messages like, "We hope you're enjoying your big, empty house." My mom posted a vague Facebook message about children who forget who raised them, and now even people I barely know are sending me opinions. So, AITA for refusing to let my parents move in after they sold their house, assuming I'd take them. AITA for refusing to let my brother stay with me after he blew up his own life and expected me to fix everything like I always do. I'm a 34-year-old man living alone in a small but comfortable 2-bedroom apartment that I bought outright 5 years ago after grinding through a decade of working 2 jobs. I've always been the responsible one in my family, the one who pays bills on time, the one who drives parents to appointments, the one who remembers birthdays and arranges gatherings because no one else will. It's not that I love doing those things, it's just that someone has to, and for as long as I can remember, that someone has been me. My younger brother, 29, is the exact opposite. Jake is charismatic, fun, good with people, quick talking, quick smiling, and quick to walk away the moment consequences start knocking on the door. Our parents alternated between enabling him and crying over him, hoping he'd magically transform into someone who follows through. He never did. They always told me I should be more understanding because he's the baby of the family. A month ago, Jay called me at 2 a.m. saying he needed to stay with me for a couple days. He'd had a fight with his girlfriend, got kicked out, and couldn't go to our parents because mom was recovering from surgery and dad had threatened to change the locks the last time Jake crashed there and left a trail of broken promises and broken furniture behind. I wasn't exactly excited about the idea, but I also didn't want him sleeping in his car, so I told him fine, he could stay for 2 days, but he needed to respect my space. The first day wasn't terrible. He slept. I went to work. He borrowed my car without asking but brought it back with gas, so I let it slide. The second day, he cooked in my kitchen and left it a mess, then used my laundry detergent to wash his entire wardrobe, leaving my machine making a weird clicking noise. But whatever. I thought he'd leave soon. Then day 3 came, and he didn't even pretend to pack. I reminded him he needed to find another place because I had work deadlines and couldn't deal with chaos. That turned into him saying he needed just a little more time. When I held firm, he said I was being dramatic and ungrateful and that he was family and would do the same for me, which was a blatant lie, but I didn't want to fight. I repeated the deadline. He didn't move. Instead, over the next week, he turned my apartment into something between a bachelor crash pad and a tornado site. My carefully arranged living room became a graveyard of his socks, energy drink cans, and bags of fast food. He took my laptop without asking, created a profile for himself, and downloaded some shady-looking apps that triggered a security alert. He borrowed my car multiple times, and once came back smelling like weed mixed with something that was definitely not weed. He started inviting people over when I wasn't home. I found out because my neighbor texted asking if everything was okay, since loud music was blasting from my place at noon on a Wednesday. I confronted him, and he laughed, saying it was harmless, and I should loosen up. He told me he was planning to stay maybe a month or 2 until he got on his feet. I told him absolutely not and reminded him the original agreement was 2 days. He said agreements don't matter between brothers and that I sounded like a landlord preparing to evict a tenant. That was the moment something snapped in me. The next morning, I took the spare key from his backpack while he was asleep. I called my dad and explained everything. Dad apologized, said he was sorry I'd been carrying the weight of Jake's messes for years, and told me to do whatever I needed to do. That alone almost made me cry. I I wrote Jake a note telling him he needed to be out by noon, that I wasn't discussing this anymore, and that if he refused, I would involve the police because this was my property. He woke up at 11, read the note, stormed into my room, and accused me of betraying him. He said I was abandoning him when he was at his lowest. I told him he wasn't abandoning anything because he had never done anything for me to abandon. I said I wasn't his safety net and never agreed to be. He ranted, yelled, and tried guilt-tripping me with childhood memories, then attempted the "you owe me because we're family" speech again. Nothing worked. At noon, I pointed to the door. He left, but slammed it hard enough to rattle the frame. Hours later, my phone blew up with messages from cousins and aunts saying I was cruel, heartless, selfish, that family should help each other, that Jake just needed love, that I had a home and he didn't. Meanwhile, my parents surprisingly defended me, saying that I had done enough and Jake needed real consequences. Jake himself hasn't contacted me except for one message that said, "I hope you never need me the way I needed you." The thing is, I feel bad. I don't want to throw him out. I don't want him homeless. But I also don't want to be the person who sacrifices my mental health, my space, my safety, and my work stability because my brother refuses to grow up. I've spent my whole life being the only responsible one. When is it okay to stop? So now I'm stuck wondering if I should have endured a little longer or help him find a more structured plan instead of kicking him out so bluntly. Part of me thinks I did what any reasonable person would do. Another part of me feels guilty, like maybe I should have been his last refuge, even if it drained me. AITA? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my sister move into my house after she accused me of sabotaging her wedding. I'm 34 and my sister Jenna is 31. We've never been best friends, but we've always managed to stay civil enough during holidays and birthdays. Our relationship has always had an undertone of competition that she seems to feed on, but I've usually just ignored it. Jenna got engaged last year to her boyfriend, Mark. They're one of those couples who start planning the wedding the day after the engagement. Jenna hired a wedding planner, built Pinterest boards, bought stacks of bridal magazines, and basically made the next 11 months her entire personality. That's fine, I guess, though she talked about her wedding so much that my ears practically developed muscle memory to tune her out. For reasons I still don't understand, she chose me as her maid of honor. We aren't close, but she said she wanted someone reliable, which may have been the first and last compliment she has ever given me. I accepted because I genuinely wanted to support her, even if I knew there would be stress. Fast forward to April of this year. Jenna assigned me a list of tasks longer than some of my work projects. Picking up flower samples, coordinating with vendors, assembling welcome bags, and helping her choose between nearly identical shades of pastel linens. I did it, all of it, even when it meant using my PTO or staying up late. The only task I asked to skip was the bachelorette party planning because I'm not a party person. She agreed, but brought it up passive-aggressively at every opportunity. 3 months before the wedding, Jenna decided she wanted an outdoor ceremony at a lakeside property owned by a family friend. The venue is gorgeous, but the area is known for unpredictable weather. I voiced concerns, gently, because a sudden storm could ruin everything. She responded by saying I had negative energy and that I always try to bring her down. I dropped it because I didn't want to fight. 2 weeks before the wedding, the weather report predicted a strong storm system moving in on the exact weekend of her ceremony. The planner suggested moving the ceremony tent earlier or relocating entirely. Jenna refused, claiming the forecast was dramatic and would probably change. Mark looked uncomfortable, but he didn't challenge her. She then asked me to call the rental company to confirm the tent setup. I did, and the earliest they could do it without interfering with another event was the morning of the ceremony. I told Jenna, and she freaked out, saying I should have pushed harder. I reminded her that I don't own the company, but she wouldn't listen. The wedding day arrived, and the sky looked like it had been painted by a moody teenager. Dark clouds, heavy wind, the whole dramatic setup. The tent crew was late due to flooded roads. Guests began arriving while workers were still wrestling with tent poles. The planner was running around like a panicked hummingbird. Jenna was blaming everyone except herself. The ceremony began 20 minutes late. They barely got through the vows before the sky opened up with rain that felt like it was coming from a broken fire hose. People scattered. Decorations dissolved into mush. Some guests slipped in the mud. The cake, which had been set on a table near the water because Jenna wanted lake ambience, was ruined. She blamed me. Not immediately, but later that evening. I had helped carry soggy decorations back to the cars and even stood in the rain handing out towels from the venue supply closet. Yet when things quieted down, she marched up to me dripping in mascara and fury and said, "I know you sabotaged this." I genuinely laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She said I had manifested failure by doubting the weather, that I didn't push the tent company hard enough, that I had negative energy that somehow influenced the storm system sweeping across 3 counties. She even accused me of wanting the wedding to fail so I could feel superior. I told her that if I had the power to control the weather, I'd be doing something more exciting than renting a 2-bedroom home in the suburbs. She didn't find that funny. We didn't talk for 2 months after that. I figured she needed space to cool off and realize how absurd her accusations were. Instead, she and Mark ended up losing their rented apartment because the landlord sold the building and they needed a temporary place to stay. She reached out to ask if they could stay with me for a few weeks. I hesitated because her wedding meltdown still stung, but I was willing to consider it, until she said she wanted me to apologize for ruining the happiest day of her life before she moved in. I told her there was no universe in which I would apologize for the weather. She got angry again. She said I was being cruel and selfish, and that family helps family even when they make mistakes. I replied that she was the one who made the mistake by blaming me for something I didn't do. A few days later, my parents called. They said Jenna was desperate and that I should be the bigger person. I asked them if they thought I controlled the storm. They dodged the question. Now, they're all upset with me for refusing to let her move in. I feel bad that she and Mark are struggling, but I can't bring myself to share my home with someone who genuinely believes I summoned a monsoon to ruin her wedding. So, am I the asshole for holding my boundary and refusing to let them move in without apologizing? AITA for refusing to let my brother and his fiancée use my house for their budget-friendly wedding after they tried to rewrite all the rules of my own home? I, 34M, bought my house 6 years ago. It's a decent place, big yard, a finished basement, and a large deck. I worked my butt off for years, lived frugally, and finally reached a point where I could afford something stable. I'm proud of it. I take good care of it. My younger brother, Liam, 29M, has always teased me for being weirdly attached to my home, calling me a suburban dad even though I don't actually have kids. Liam and his fiancée, Cara, 27F, got engaged last year and immediately started planning a wedding. Cara is the kind of person who loves big gestures but hates big budgets. Their dream venue was a rustic farm-themed wedding with tons of greenery and fairy lights. But once they saw the cost, they panicked. They tried negotiating with venues, cutting guest lists, pushing their wedding to a weekday, everything. Still way too expensive. A couple months ago, during a family dinner at my place, Cara looked around and said something like, "This deck is really spacious, and your yard is so cute." I didn't think anything of it until a week later when Liam called and asked if they could have their wedding at my house. I said I'd think about it. I didn't want to say no immediately because he's my brother and we're relatively close. But hosting a wedding is a huge deal. I asked him some questions like how many people, if they planned to bring vendors, what kind of setup, and whether they were planning to rent tents or bathrooms. They said around 95 guests and just a few vendors. Nothing major. I hesitated, but after talking with my girlfriend and my parents, decided I could do it under certain conditions. Mainly, fewer than 60 people, professional cleanup afterward, no drilling or attaching anything to the house, and no pets. They wanted a dog-friendly ceremony. I also said I wouldn't be financially contributing beyond the space. They eagerly said yes to everything. Or so I thought. About 2 weeks later, Cara invited me to this group chat called Vision Team. I already cringed. Inside, She had uploaded multiple mood boards involving string lights wrapped around my actual gutters, a walkway lined with candles, fire hazard, a plan to temporarily remove my lawn chairs and replace them with mismatched vintage seating they intended to borrow, plus a suggestion to paint a small mural on the back fence because it would make an adorable backdrop. Not hang a backdrop. Paint one. On my fence. That I stained myself last summer. I texted saying none of that was allowed. No painting the fence, no screwing hooks into my deck, no candles lining the grass. Kara wrote a paragraph about how restricting creativity was anti-wedding energy. Then they raised the guest count to 120 because some people guilt them. I told them absolutely not. I reminded them the limit was 60 maximum or the deal was off. She said 60 was barely enough for immediate family. My brother chimed in with, "Bro, it's just space. What does it matter?" Things escalated when Kara announced she planned to get ready in my bedroom because it had the best lighting. She actually included a Pinterest link showing a setup that involved moving my bed against the wall and removing my blackout curtains. She also expected my girlfriend and me to not be in the house during the wedding day because it's awkward for the couple. That was it. I told them they could not use my house, and the wedding was not happening there, period. Liam called me immediately, furious. He said I was punishing them for being excited and acting like a landlord instead of a brother. He said I didn't understand weddings and that it's normal for hosts to make adjustments. I corrected him and said a venue host, maybe, but not a random person who owns a home they live in. He kept insisting it wasn't a big deal, that they put everything back afterward, and that I was ruining their dream because of a few silly little rules. I asked him if he'd let 120 people trample his apartment and rearrange all his belongings. He said that was different because he doesn't have a yard. My parents tried to stay neutral at first, but eventually sided with Liam, saying I should help family when I can. My mom said she had always imagined us being closer and hosting family events together. But even she admitted painting the fence was too much. The final straw happened last week when I learned Kara had already told her bridesmaids that the wedding was happening at my house and that I was being picky, but she'd talk me around. One bridesmaid actually messaged me asking what time she could come for hair and makeup. She assumed she'd be getting ready in my dining room. I confronted Liam about this, and he said they just got a little ahead of themselves. I told him no, they got ahead of me, and the answer was still no. Now Liam and Kara have had to scramble to find a new solution. They're angry because everything affordable is booked, and they're blaming me for creating chaos. Liam said I embarrassed them and that I owe them help because I initially said yes. I honestly feel bad. I know weddings are stressful, but I also think they steamrolled every boundary I set and treated my home like a blank canvas for their Pinterest vision board. My girlfriend says I made the only reasonable decision, but my parents are disappointed and Liam is barely speaking to me. AITA for refusing to let them use my house after realizing what their vision actually involved. AITA for kicking my cousin out of my house after she tried to secretly move her kids in without asking me. I'm 33F and bought my first house 2 years ago. It's nothing fancy, but it has 3 bedrooms, a small yard, and enough space for me to finally feel like an adult. I worked incredibly hard to get here. I grew up in a family where no one owned a home. Everyone lived paycheck to paycheck, and the general attitude was that if someone had more, they should share it. Not in a generous community way, but in a passive-aggressive, entitled way. I've tried to distance myself from that mindset. Enter my cousin, Dana, 36F. We were close as kids, but drifted apart as adults because Dana always had some kind of crisis going on. She has 2 kids, 8 and 11, and left her ex 3 years ago. Since then, she's bounced between apartments, jobs, and boyfriends. She's not a bad person, but she makes chaotic choices and expects everyone else to help clean them up. About 5 months ago, Dana called me saying her roommate bailed on her lease and she couldn't cover the rent alone. She said she needed a place to crash for a few nights while she figured things out. She asked if she could stay in my guest room. I hesitated, but agreed because it was temporary and Dana sounded genuinely stressed. I made it clear that it was only for a few days, and she said, "Of course, I'd never impose on you." The first red flag, she showed up with 4 suitcases. I asked her why she had so much stuff for a few days, and she said she just grabbed what she could quickly. I didn't push it, but I mentally noted it. A few days turned into a week. Then two. Every time I asked about her housing situation, she said she was working on it. She was polite, clean, and even cooked dinner a couple times. But she also began making comments like, "Your place has so much room, and it's so peaceful here, the kids would love it." I asked what she meant by "the kids would love it," and she said she just meant generally, nothing more. But she got weirdly defensive, so I dropped it. One night, about 3 weeks in, I came home from work and noticed boxes in my garage. Not mine. I opened one and saw children's clothes. I went inside and found Dana sitting on the couch looking guilty. She said, "Okay, don't freak out," which is exactly the thing you say when someone should freak out. She explained she had moved some of her kids' stuff in advance because she knew I'd eventually agree to letting her and the kids stay until she got a new apartment. She said she didn't want to bring it up before because she was afraid I'd say no. I told her I wasn't comfortable with that at all. I never agreed to her kids living with me. I barely agreed to her staying with me. I felt manipulated and blindsided. Dana immediately started crying, saying she had no other options, that her kids were staying with her ex temporarily, and that she couldn't keep bouncing them around. She said I had a stable home and would hardly notice a couple kids. I told her I understood her situation, but that didn't give her the right to make unilateral decisions about my house. She tried to guilt me by saying, "You know what it's like growing up unstable. I thought you'd want to help spare them that." I reminded her that helping someone doesn't mean sacrificing your own boundaries and that manipulating me wasn't okay. I told her she had 1 week to make other arrangements. Over that week, she kept trying to negotiate. She said the kids could share a room, they'd stay out of my way, she'd contribute a little to bills. But everything she proposed felt like she assumed the answer was eventually going to be yes. She even had her kids call me and say they missed her and wanted to be a family again, which made me feel sick because it was so unfair to them and to me. Finally, the week was up and she still hadn't moved. I told her she needed to leave that day. She started yelling that I was heartless and selfish, that I was choosing peace and quiet over actual people, and that family helps family. I told her family doesn't lie or try to force their way into your life. When she still refused to pack, I told her she needed to go or I'd have to involve the police. That got through to her. She packed angrily, grabbed the kids' boxes from the garage, and left while calling me names the entire time. Since then, my family has been split. Some say she was wrong to ambush me with her kids and belongings. Others say I should have stepped up because I have a house and she doesn't. My aunt messaged me saying people with space should share it. God punishes greed. A cousin told me Dana is staying in a cramped studio and the kids hate it and that it's my fault. I feel guilty because I know her kids didn't ask for any of this. They deserve stability. But I also know Dana purposely tried to corner me into a situation she knew I would never freely choose. And if I let her stay, I might never get my house back. I've seen this pattern with her too many times. So, AITA for kicking her out after she tried to sneak her kids into my house without my permission. AITA for refusing to let my brother and his fiancée move into my house after they assumed they were entitled to it. A few months ago, I inherited my grandmother's old craftsman house. It's a modest place, nothing fancy, but it has character and a decent-sized yard. My grandma and I were close, so the house means a lot to me emotionally. When she passed, she left it to me because I was the one who visited her weekly, helped with errands, maintained the garden, and stayed with her during her health issues. No one else in the family stepped up like that, and she knew the house would be safe with me. My older brother, Max, always assumed he'd be the one inheriting something big. He's the stereotypical golden child, though he's not particularly successful. He jumps from job to job, burns bridges, and somehow our parents find a way to blame anyone but him. Before my grandma passed, he'd show up once a year for Christmas, acting like he was the devoted grandson. They'd exchange pleasantries. He'd make a big show of hugging her, and then he'd disappear again. He never visited her during hospital stays, never helped with anything around the house, and honestly seemed annoyed whenever I talked about my time with her. Fast forward to after a funeral, Everyone is gathered at my parents' house, and the topic of the inheritance comes up. When it was revealed that the house was left to me, Max's face fell so hard it was almost comical. My parents looked confused and mildly annoyed, but didn't say much at the time. Max's fiancée, Jenna, though, whispered something to him and immediately started giving me strange looks. For context, Max and Jenna were living in an apartment they hated. They constantly complained about rent going up, their neighbors being loud, and the place being too small. They've been talking about wanting to move somewhere bigger, but never took any real steps. I knew they were stressed, but that had nothing to do with me. A few weeks later, I started moving into my grandmother's house. I was taking my time, cleaning each room carefully, keeping the pieces of furniture that meant something to me, and donating things she would have wanted others to have. It was emotionally tough, but it felt like the right way to honor her. Then Max and Jenna showed up one afternoon completely unannounced. They let themselves in because Max still had an old key from years ago. They walked around like they were touring a rental property. Jenna was pointing at walls saying things like, "We'll need to repaint this, and this room will be perfect for the nursery someday." Max nodded along like it was already theirs. I finally asked what they were doing. Jenna gave me this extremely fake smile and said, "We were just getting a sense of what we'll need to do before we move in." I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Max looked at me like I was the crazy one. He explained that they had made the logical decision to move into the house with me. He said the place had too much space for one person and that it made more sense for me to help out family since the house was basically free to me. He also insisted they'd only stay until they got on their feet, which is something he said about every place he's ever crashed at, usually for years. I told them absolutely not. It was my house, my inheritance, and it wasn't up for discussion. Jenna's smile disappeared instantly. She said I was being selfish and that I didn't need the whole house. Max went into a rant about how I was taking advantage of Grandma's love and that if the will had been discussed properly, he should have had a say. I reminded him that he rarely visited and did nothing to help Grandma in her final years. He called my words cruel and said I was attacking him while he was grieving. They eventually left after accusing me of betraying my own family. Later that night, my parents called me. My mom said I should consider letting them stay for a few months because they were under a lot of stress and it would bring the family together. My dad chimed in, saying Grandma would have wanted us to share. I told them Grandma explicitly told me she wanted me to have a house, so I'd have stability, and she did not want Max taking advantage of it. My parents insisted I was misinterpreting her wishes. They said I was hurting Max during a time he needed support. I told them I wasn't responsible for fixing his life. They hung up, disappointed, and told other relatives, resulting in several cousins sending me messages about how family helps family. The frustrating part is that many of these people didn't lift a finger to help Grandma, yet now they all seem eager to dictate what I should do with the one thing I received because I actually showed up for her. It reached a breaking point when Max tried to return to the house a week later with boxes. He genuinely thought I'd changed my mind after cooling off. I told him to leave immediately or I'd call the police. He called me heartless and left screaming that I'd regret this. Now the family is split. A few relatives who actually knew Grandma well are firmly on my side. Others are lecturing me about generosity and duty. Max and Jenna have blocked me on everything except group chats where they occasionally post passive-aggressive comments. I feel guilty because I never wanted a huge family fight. I just wanted to quietly live in the house and cherish Grandma's memory. But now every choice feels magnified. Part of me wonders if I'm being too rigid or if I could have handled the situation better. Another part of me knows they'd walk all over me if I gave an inch. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother and his fiancée move into the house I inherited, even though my family insists I should. AITA for refusing to let my brother and his fiancée use my house for their wedding after they treated me like free labor for months. So for context, I'm 32 and own a small but very pretty property that I inherited from our grandparents. It's not fancy, but the backyard is huge, full of old oak trees and wildflowers, and over the past 5 years I've put in a ton of work making it look like a low-budget but charming nature retreat. My brother, 29, got engaged last year to his fiancée, who I'll call Jenna. She's always been polite but distant with me. We're not close, which is fine. When they announced their engagement, everyone in the family was happy. At a dinner shortly after, Jenna brought up how expensive wedding venues were. My mom made an offhand joke like, "Too bad you can't just borrow your sister's backyard." Jenna immediately latched onto the idea, turning to me with this bright, expectant look and saying something like, "That could actually be perfect." I was caught off guard but said I'd think about it. Later that week, my brother asked me seriously if they could host the wedding at my place. I wasn't against it, but I knew that hosting a wedding isn't just letting people show up. It's prep, cleanup, logistics, parking, and potential damage. So I agreed under the conditions that they'd cover any rentals, cleanup crew, and damages, and that I'd need some say over what happened on my property. They both agreed enthusiastically. For the first 2 months, everything was fine. They checked in occasionally, sent me photos of decor ideas, and asked reasonable questions. I even helped them measure the yard for tent placement and walk them through where guests could park. But slowly, something shifted. The questions became expectations. The expectations became demands. Suddenly, I wasn't the sister offering the venue. I was the unpaid wedding coordinator, landscaper, and general problem solver. One day, Jenna sent me a list, not a request, a list of landscaping changes she wanted done before the wedding. Things like clearing out a patch of brush on the side yard, moving some decorative stones, trimming trees I had intentionally grown out for shade, and even replanting flowers because the colors didn't match her palette. She also wanted me to power wash my entire patio because, in her words, the photos will look better if everything is pristine. I told her I wasn't doing all that. I reminded her the yard is as is. She replied with a long message about how she dreamt of an outdoor wedding her whole life and how hosting in a family space would mean so much to them. She said she knew I'd want it to look perfect too. Well, I didn't budge. She asked if I could at least split the cost of hiring a landscaper. I said no. After that, she started using my brother as a messenger. He called me saying things like, "Jenna's really stressed. Can you just help out a little? You know how she gets." Or my fiancée is literally crying because she feels like you don't care about her big day. Then came the weekend I will never forget. I came home from running errands and found Jenna, her mom, and 2 bridesmaids in my backyard. They let themselves in through the side gate and were rearranging my patio furniture. They had also brought in several sample decorations and were setting them up to take photos. Without asking, without telling me. I was so stunned I genuinely didn't know what to say at first. When I confronted them, Jenna acted like I was being rude for interrupting. She said they were just doing test shots and nothing was permanent. I told them firmly but calmly that they needed to leave and they needed to ask permission before entering my property. Jenna burst into tears. Her mom gave me this very pointed lecture about how weddings can turn women into emotional messes and that I should be more understanding. I told them that emotional or not, they don't get to trespass. After that incident, I told my brother in very clear terms that the wedding could still happen in my yard, but only if boundaries were respected and if I wasn't treated like staff member. He apologized and swore things would improve. Spoiler, they did not. Over the next few weeks, Jenna kept bringing up smaller demands. Could I remove the wind chimes because she found them distracting? Could I store all my gardening tools off-site because they were an eyesore? Could I reschedule a vacation I had planned 2 weeks before the wedding because she wanted to come by with vendors? Each time I said no. Each time she acted personally wounded. Then last month, I overheard something that made everything snap. My cousin sent me a short clip from a group chat she was in, with Jenna complaining about how uncooperative I was. She said, "I swear, if she wasn't family, I'd just pay someone to pretend to own the property and get her out of the way." She also said that I was being cheap, difficult, and intentionally sabotaging her wedding out of jealousy. People laughed along with her. I'm not a confrontational person, but that pushed me over the edge. I called my brother and told him the wedding was no longer happening at my house. He thought I was joking at first. When he realized I wasn't, he begged me to reconsider. He said they'd already sent save the dates with my address. He said it would humiliate them to change venues so close to the date. I told him that humiliation is a natural consequence of treating people like they're disposable. He told me I was blowing everything out of proportion and that Jenna was just stressed. I told him being stressed doesn't give someone the right to insult me behind my back or trespass on my property. He accused me of punishing him for Jenna's behavior. I told him he enabled her. Since then, both he and my mom have been alternating between guilt trips and anger. My mom says family should always help family, and that Jenna's behavior wasn't personal. My brother says I'm making their lives hell and ruining his fiancé's dream. A couple of relatives, though, have told me they're proud of me for standing my ground. One even said they were surprised I lasted as long as I did. But the guilt is eating at me. I know changing a wedding venue last minute is a nightmare. I know my decision has ripple effects. Part of me worries that I acted impulsively out of hurt and spite. Another part of me knows that if I cave now, I'll teach everyone that treating me like a doormat works. So, AITA for refusing to let them use my house for their wedding after months of disrespect and entitlement. AITA for refusing to let my brother and his pregnant wife move into my house, even though it technically has the space, and now everyone says I'm choosing a hobby over family. A few years ago, I bought a 4-bedroom house after saving aggressively. I'm 34, single, and work as a software engineer. I don't have kids, but I do have a passion: restoring old arcade machines. It started with one vintage cabinet I picked up from a closing pizza place, and then it snowballed. I now have about 8 restored or partially restored machines, plus shelves of tools and spare parts. I don't drink, I don't travel much, and I don't collect a lot of other things. This is my one big and admittedly space-consuming hobby. 2 of the spare bedrooms are normal guest rooms. One room I use as an office. The 4th is my workshop and storage for the arcade machines. The machines are heavy and delicate, and moving them around takes careful planning. That room is basically a controlled environment at this point. My younger brother, 30, recently announced that he and his wife are expecting their first child. I'm happy for them, but financially they're struggling. They live in a 1-bedroom apartment. His wife was advised to reduce her work hours due to complications in the pregnancy, and my brother's job in retail management doesn't pay much. Their landlord raised the rent, and they decided moving was inevitable. They've always assumed they'd eventually end up living with family temporarily, if needed, but our parents downsized to a small condo after retirement. That left me. My brother called one night and said they needed a place for just 6 months to a year until they get on their feet. They wanted to move into my house. When I asked which room they had in mind, he said the workshop room because it was the biggest and closest to the bathroom and the only one that would comfortably fit a crib and their stuff. I told him that room wasn't empty, and he said he already knew, but that all that hobby junk could be put into storage or the garage. The problem is that my garage is already half workshop, half parking space. I live in an area where break-ins aren't uncommon, and I absolutely do not want thousands of dollars worth of electronics sitting exposed in a garage. Also, renting a storage unit large enough for the machines and tools would cost hundreds per month. I explained all of this calmly. He said, and I quote, "You have 4 bedrooms, and we have none. You don't even use that space for a real purpose." That pissed me off more than I expected. I told him restoring machines is my real purpose when I'm not working. I don't golf, I don't party on weekends, I don't even take vacations often. This is what I pour my time into. He argued that hobbies shouldn't come before family and said I was acting selfish. I offered them one of the regular guest rooms. It's smaller but functional. They could absolutely fit a bed and a crib, and I even said I'd help them rearrange things and prepare the space. He refused immediately because the baby needs room and my wife needs to be comfortable. I told him that was my best offer. That's when he snapped and said I was forcing his pregnant wife into cramped conditions while I protected old trash machines. I ended the call before I said anything worse. The next day, my parents called. They said they weren't taking sides, but that, as the sibling with space, I should consider helping more. I explained the storage cost and the risk to my machines. My dad understood, but my mom basically said, "You can always start that hobby again later. Family is permanent." I reminded her that the proposed time frame was 6 months to a year, and that with a baby involved, realistically, it would be more. My brother confirmed that later by texting that it might take longer depending on housing availability. I told my parents I'm not kicking them out of my house. They can move into the guest room anytime. I just won't sacrifice my workspace. Mom said they'd feel too cramped and that I should compromise more. I asked why my brother couldn't compromise by taking the guest room. Mom had no answer. A few days later, my brother's wife sent me a long message saying she was heartbroken I didn't care enough about her and the baby to give them the space they need. She said pregnancy is hard, she's scared, and she needs comfort and stability. I do feel for her, but I also feel like their expectation is unreasonable. If they need a whole bedroom that large, they should be looking for rentals or government assistance programs, not taking over someone's hobby room and demanding they pay to store their belongings. Now my extended family is chiming in. My aunt said I'm being materialistic. My cousin, who also has a niche hobby, model trains, said he would never give up his hobby space for anyone except a spouse or child. My grandmother thinks I should let them stay, but charge rent. My brother has already said they can't afford rent. I asked him why they couldn't take my smaller spare room, and he said his wife won't be comfortable and the baby deserves their own space. I tried again, gently suggesting that millions of babies grow up in small rooms or share space with parents, and they'd only be here temporarily. He said it's about respect, and that I should step up as an uncle. I responded that stepping up doesn't mean doing exactly what he demands at the cost of my own life. Now he has stopped speaking to me entirely. A few friends said I did the right thing by offering the guest room. Others say I should have just boxed up my hobby and helped them because they're family and struggling. But I can't shake the feeling that their requests were way beyond reasonable and came with a layer of entitlement I'm not comfortable with. I've worked very hard to build my home and afford my hobbies, and I don't like being told that my lifestyle is less important because I don't have kids. Still, I keep wondering if I'm missing something. They're expecting a baby, and maybe I should have made a bigger sacrifice. But at the same time, I offer them a safe, clean room for free for as long as they need. It's not like I turned them away entirely. So, AITA for refusing to give up my hobby room to let my brother and his pregnant wife move in. AITA for refusing to let my brother stay with me after he quit his job to find himself and assumed I'd support him. I'm 30F, single, and live in a small 2-bedroom townhouse that I bought last year. I love my home. I'm introverted, work long hours, and really value having a quiet space that's fully mine. My family knows this, and up until recently, they seem to respect it. My brother, Evan, 27M, has always been the free spirit of the family. In high school, he tried about 10 hobbies, joined and quit multiple clubs, and always said he didn't want a boring life. As an adult, that turned into working random jobs, leaving them abruptly, traveling, couch hopping, and generally expecting someone else to pick up the slack when things didn't work out. My parents bailed him out financially more times than I can count, but they're nearing retirement now and can't help him much anymore. About 2 months ago, Evan called me and said he'd quit his job at a local warehouse because he couldn't breathe in that environment and needed to pursue creative freedom. I asked what his plan was, and he said, "Well, that's where you come in." I told him I didn't like where that sentence was going. He laughed and said he wanted to stay with me for a little while so he could reset mentally without stress or bills. I asked how long a little while meant, and he said, "Just until I get back on my feet." I pointed out he had no job lined up, no plan for one, and that it could be months. He shrugged and said, "Life is unpredictable." I told him I wasn't comfortable with that. I didn't want a long-term guest, and I didn't want to become financially responsible for him. Evan tried to guilt-trip me, saying he'd always supported me emotionally. He hadn't really, and that siblings were supposed to be there for each other. I told him I could help him job search or edit resumes, but I wasn't opening my home indefinitely. He hung up angry. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, he showed up at my door with 3 duffel bags and a guitar case. He grinned and said, "I knew you'd come around." I told him he couldn't stay. He tried to push past me, saying it was already done and he just needed to set up in the spare room. I blocked him and told him again. He was not moving in. He got annoyed and said I was being dramatic. He claimed he'd only stay a few weeks, but even then I knew he was thinking months. I asked him where he was living at the moment, and he said he'd left his old apartment 2 days earlier because he didn't vibe with the landlord. So he'd already planned to rely on me, even after I said no. When I held my boundary, he got loud. He said I was selfish, privileged, and controlling. He said I didn't even need the space, and that letting him stay wouldn't hurt me. I reminded him he didn't get to decide how I felt in my own home. After a few minutes of arguing, he stormed off, muttering that he couldn't believe I'd do this to him. I thought that was the end of it, but the next day my parents called. Apparently, Evan had told them I kicked him out onto the street and didn't care if he lived or died. They scolded me for not helping family in a crisis. I explained exactly what happened, but my mom said, "He's your brother. You have extra space. Why not just let him stay until he figures things out?" I told them that figuring things out for Evan could take years. My dad said I was exaggerating. I reminded him Evan once spent 9 months finding himself in our parents' basement while they paid all his bills. My mom said this time will be different because he's older now. I asked them if they thought he would move in with them instead, and suddenly they got quiet. For the next week, Evan bounced between friends' couches, but he kept messaging me nonstop. First it was guilt tripping. "I can't believe you of all people would abandon me." Then it was manipulation. "I'll just stay for a month, promise." Then anger. "You're a real piece of work, you know that." Then pity-seeking. "I'm sleeping on a floor tonight." I stopped responding because every message stressed me out more. Then things escalated. One night around 10 p.m., I heard someone trying to open my front door. I froze, thinking it was a break-in, but then I heard Evan whispering my name. He had come to my house unannounced again and was trying the handle, just in case I'd changed my mind. I told him through the door to leave or I'd call the police. He argued, saying he wasn't doing anything wrong and just wanted to talk. I repeated myself. After a few minutes, he left, calling me heartless as he walked away. The next morning, I got messages from 2 aunts and a cousin accusing me of abandoning family and acting like a stranger. Apparently, Evan had told everyone that I'd locked him out in the cold and refused to help him even when he begged. No mention of him trying to move in against my clear boundaries. Now there's a family split. Some relatives think I'm cruel. Others know how Evan is and say he needs tough love. My parents aren't speaking to me much except to send occasional texts like, "We hope you realize family is more important than comfort." I won't lie. Part of me feels guilty. I know Evan is struggling. I know he's directionless and probably scared. But another part of me knows that if I let him stay even one night, he'd take it as a green light to stay indefinitely. And I'd lose my peace, my space, and possibly my savings. I worked hard for stability, and I don't want to sacrifice it because my brother refuses to take responsibility for his life. But with all the messages, calls, accusations, and pressure, I'm starting to wonder. AITA for refusing to let my brother stay with me and enforcing a hard boundary? AITA for refusing to let my brother's fiancée wear my late mother's wedding dress even though it caused a massive family fallout? My mom passed away 5 years ago after a long illness. She and I were extremely close. I'm the oldest daughter and was basically her caregiver during the last 2 years of her life. Before she died, she left behind a few sentimental items for each of her kids, and the most meaningful thing she left me was her wedding dress. It wasn't super fancy, but it was the dress she married my dad in, the one in all the photos I grew up seeing. It meant a lot to her and, by extension, to me. She specifically told me she wanted me to have it, not because she expected me to wear it someday, but because she knew I was the one who cared most about preserving her things. Anyway, fast forward to this year. My younger brother, Mark, got engaged to his fiancée, Lily. At first, everything was fine. We all liked her, though I always felt she had a tendency to treat our family traditions like props for her own aesthetic. She's very into vintage themes and Pinterest-style weddings. Still, she seemed nice enough and good for my brother. About 3 months ago, during a family dinner, Lily casually brought up the idea of wearing a vintage dress for her wedding. Then she looked straight at me and said she'd love to wear our mom's dress, not borrow it for photos, not incorporate part of it into her own dress, wear it as her wedding gown. I froze. My dad froze. My siblings froze. It was like the whole room went silent in unison. I told her I wasn't comfortable with that and that the dress had huge emotional meaning for me. I said it wasn't something I could share, and I hoped she understood. She did not understand. Lily got emotional, and said she felt like I was rejecting her as part of the family. She went on about how wearing the dress would be a tribute to my mother and how it would show that she wanted Mom to be part of her big day, even though they never met. My brother tried to smooth things over, but he clearly thought it was a good idea too. Over the next few weeks, Lily kept bringing it up. She'd send me photos of the dress style she wanted and how she could have it altered. She insisted she'd take good care of it. She even suggested I was being possessive and selfish over a piece of fabric. I finally told her, firmly, that the answer was no. Not maybe, not later. No. That's when things really exploded. Mark called me and accused me of intentionally making Lily feel like an outsider. He said she had cried to him about wanting to feel connected to Mom, and that my refusal confirmed her fear that I never considered her real family. He also told me that Lily's parents thought I was being dramatic, and that if my mom were alive, she'd be thrilled to see her dress used again. I lost it at that comment. I reminded him that Mom had intentionally left the dress to me alone, and that she had every right to choose who inherited it. I said wearing it wasn't some family free-for-all. It was my personal keepsake. He called me cold. I called him clueless. We didn't speak for 2 weeks afterward. During this time, Lily decided to escalate things by talking to our extended family behind my back. Suddenly, I was getting texts from cousins I barely speak to, telling me I should be honored someone wanted to wear my mother's dress. My aunt called and lectured me about how families are about sharing, not hoarding sentimental items. Even my grandmother gently suggested that maybe letting Lily wear the dress would help everyone heal. The only person solidly on my side has been my dad. He told me Mom gave me the dress for a reason and that I don't owe it to anyone to hand it over. But he's also tired of the conflict and hates seeing Mark and me fighting. Last month, we had a big family meeting to try to clear the air. It was a disaster. Lily cried before anyone even sat down. Mark insisted I hadn't tried hard enough to compromise. And Lily, in this trembling voice, said she felt unwanted and that the wedding felt tainted because she knew I didn't support her being part of the family. I told her I did support her, but the dress was off limits. I suggested alternatives. She could wear a veil made from part of Mom's old tablecloth. Mom had used it at our family celebrations. She could incorporate lace from one of Mom's sewing projects, or she could carry Mom's locket down the aisle. All of these were meaningful and still honored Mom without touching the dress. She said no to all of them. The dress was the only thing she wanted. At that point, I told her I didn't know what else to say. I wasn't changing my mind. I wasn't giving up something that belonged to me and held deep emotional significance. Lily stormed out. My brother glared at me and followed her. A few days later, I got a long message from Lily saying she hoped someday I'd understand how hurtful this was and how she only wanted to honor my mother. She said she would never ask for anything again and that she hoped I enjoyed keeping her at arm's length. I didn't respond. Now the wedding is in 3 months, and I'm dreading it. Mark barely speaks to me except through short, cold texts. Lily uninvited me from the bridal shower. My aunts think I'm the villain. My cousins keep sending me passive-aggressive messages about family unity. And despite all this, I still don't think I was wrong. But now I'm so surrounded by people telling me I'm heartless that I'm starting to question myself. Should I have just let her wear the dress? Should I have compromised more, even though it felt like compromising on something painful and personal? I don't know anymore. So, AITA, thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.